This is Community Mercenaries, Episode 9. If you haven't caught on by now, this is where we make our own mercenary tanks from viewer-submitted ideas, and I'm also surprised at what cool tanks we can cook up each episode. If you have your own ideas, leave them in the comments below, or in the corresponding channel in the Discord. And with that out of the way, let's get into this batch of tanks. First up is one made by Midway, who put together a Progetto 66's Top Gun on a Centurion 5.1's turret and a General T-27's chassis. No name was given, so I'm calling it the Cub, after the creator, and this one just looked pretty nice. The neat part about this tank is that it takes an auto-reloading 120mm that's on a heavy tank and gives it a more mobile platform with better camo. So, it'd be a tier 9, but it'd be a different playstyle. If you've played both Italian lines, you know that despite both of them being auto-reloaders, the mediums play way differently to the heavies. But, this uses one of the heavies' gun as a medium, so it would play like an Italian medium, but you'd hit as hard as a 120mm would. That's not saying though that this thing lacks armor like the standard B, as the 5.1's turret is pretty stalwart, especially while using its 10 degrees of gun depression. Which, I'd say this tank wouldn't have, more like 8 degrees maybe, but the comparison to the Italian mediums was made so that we kind of understand how this tank would play, only being different as to have more alpha, so it would be unique in that regard to that kind of playstyle, which I can totally get by. Up next is a debut tank from Rye in the Discord, who put together the gun of the Emil II on the turret of the Centurion 7.1 and the chassis of the UDES 1516. What intrigued me about this tank is putting an autoloader on a manual siege mode tank, which if I'm not mistaken, has not happened yet. And the changeup of the turret being taller, I would presume, allows for better ridge peaking, but I could be wrong there too. Now the Emil II gets 12 degrees of gun depression, while the UDES gets 13. However, that takes into account that the turret alone has 6 degrees of gun depression, with 7 added while in siege mode. So, with the Centurion's turret having 10 degrees, but because a bigger gun is inserted, maybe it's 8 on this tank, that's extra gun depression that this gun wouldn't have on its native tank. And maybe more than the UDES. So depending on that, this combo could potentially be really powerful on ridgelines, which I had not even taken into account at first. At least though, it's the gun of the Emil, which some say has mediocre pen. But I'd probably give this thing more cons besides pen, maybe in its camo factors and speeds, if this thing can get so much gun depression. Oh, and he named it the Carolus Rex, which at first I didn't know what he was referring to, if anything, but looking it up, it's a Sabaton song, and a Swedish king who was the last European monarch to die on the field of battle. So it's fitting it uses Swedish parts, I suppose, and has an interesting story behind it. Last up is another made by Midway. Again, unnamed, so I named it myself. Here's the 1130. Made from the gun of the M48 A2 120mm, with the turret of the AMX-30B and the chassis of the 113. So I can hope you can kind of see where I got the name from. I really like this tank. And honestly, this might be one of the few tanks we've made that I can actually see being made in the game. I think these parts just go well together. I would consider it a medium, because the 113 isn't slow for a heavy, and has the same thickness on the upper plate as the 121, but it's way more angled. The AMX-30B has 8 degrees of gun depression, which the 113 doesn't have. But even if we bring that down to 7, as the 30B holds a 105 and not this 120mm, that's 7 off the front that the 113 does not have, because as many Chinese tanks, it has more off the side than the front. And then you're slapping on the best 120mm since its buff. And this thing just might become my new favorite medium if it becomes a thing. Camo would be mid, but I don't know. I think this just may do it for me. I might not be selling it to you right now, but for some reason it speaks to me, and I understand it. And now I want it. So make it happen, Wargaming. Please. Those are your community-made mercenary tanks for episode 9. If you have your own tanks you want to see showcased in these videos, leave them in the comments below. I read them all and will get to them all no matter how wild they seem, so fire away. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in episode 10. Stay tuned.